Welcome to episode 4 of the Non-Standard Podcast. I appreciate y'all jumping on for this one because we hit it hard. All right, so I'm on with my buddy Juan. He's in the Army. He's a 12 Bravo. And here's just some of the things we talk about, man. We talk about what is Ranger School? What is SAPPER? How do those apply to being a young leader in the military? Why are they crucial to learning how to become a better leader when you have these opportunities outside of your current job? We talk about the West Coast life. We're both from the West Coast, so we hit that pretty good at the beginning. We talk about battling back from an ankle surgery. We're in the Army. PT is king. So sometimes when you're young and you can't perform up there, how do you battle and withstand that and continue to progress in your career? We talk about how to be coachable, how to have an inner drive, how to always be learning. We hit the 4 leadership philosophy traits. We talk about a couple more, and then he recommends a great book at the end. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Again, I'm going to leave in the show notes his Instagram, the books we recommend, the podcast links, how you can share it, how you can keep this going, because we're only just getting started. Remember, the first 50 episodes are for me. The next 50 are for you. So let's hit this off and running. Hope you're ready to develop some leadership traits. Juan, what is up, man? I am freaking pumped. So thanks everybody for following along and getting ready for this journey down the leadership path. Just like I said in the intro, I got my man Juan here. He's going to give his little background after. We've only talked once before virtually. We just talked about it. It was like a couple years ago or something, but it was really short. But we're sort of following up with this. Since then, we've been following each other and watching what we've been doing. But Juan, you ready, my man?
Yeah, let's get into it, man.
Perfect. All right, so for those of you that are familiar and listen to last episode, the script is what I love because it keeps everybody intact on what we're going to talk about. So we always start off with the 3 H's. And like I've said before, I picked up these 3 H's from Columba, who got asked them in another interview he had. So I'm borrowing leadership traits here and there, and it's your hometown, a hero, and then a hardship. And then we'll dive into some leadership stuff. All right, man. So where are you from?
All right, so I always claim the West Coast. It's just easier for me. But I was born in Washington State, Olympia. I know you're familiar with Washington State. Go Huskies. But so I was born there, then moved around, moved to Alaska for a couple of years, moved to Cali. So I kind of spent my youth up until about 9, 10 years old in California, Central California, Modesto area, and then moved back to Washington to get back into middle school and ultimately graduated and enlisted out of there. So it's just easier to claim the West Coast because I've been all around the West Coast pretty much my whole life. So.
Yeah, that's cool. I claim the West Coast as well. I still feel in my heart California is one of the best places I've ever lived because I grew up there. But that Northern California is Central California, right? So it's pretty cool up there. It's not like the California people see. But, Oregon, Washington, California is what I love to claim.
Beautiful.
I would love to go back, but it's just way different now.
Yeah, it's really expensive too. So.
Yeah, yep, it very much is. Well, cool. I will mute the Huskies part when I edit this because, I almost threw up in my mind. So.
Yeah. No, my sister went to Wazoo for a little bit. I got a lot of friends that went there too. So.
Nice.
It was a nice little rivalry in the household.
It is. It's fun. Well, cool. All right, man. What do you got for heroes? A hero or two? Who do you look up to? Yeah.
So the first one is a little cliche, right? But given my background and my story, I got to give it to my mom. So I'm like adopted, but not legally adopted, right? So I left my biological family when I was like 13, 14 years old. And at my school, one of my classmates' mom was the principal of the homeschool program or whatever. And when I was going through a lot with my biological family, she would always check in, hey, do you need a ride to school, this and that. And ultimately, I went over there, to make sure I could take tests and stuff for school that week. And, I just never left. So she kind of just took me in. That family took me in. And I would not be where I am today without them, 100%. So she's definitely my hero, one of the strongest people I've ever met. And I'm just thankful for her every day. So that's my first one. My second one He's a retired master sergeant now, but when I was in Europe, I went through a lot of hardship and a lot of tough times as well. And he was just always there. Was never my direct leadership, but was always there to just keep me grounded, give me those leadership tips and advice. And he just got me through, some of the hardest times of my life when I was down there. So he's definitely one of my heroes. He had an illustrious career, combat engineer, sapper, all stuff like that. He was my best sapper coach when I competed. Um, yeah, and he's just always there for me. Even now, I hit him up all the time. So he's definitely one of my heroes as well.
That's cool. Yeah, I feel like a lot of us in our chain of command, sometimes those people aren't directly, there. They're usually outside of our direct workplace, but we have some sort of common bond with them. I've seen that a lot with even myself. I have people that I consider heroes, mentors, idols in the military that they don't, they may not even fly the B-1 or they may not even work here, but it's like, they have a relationship with us, a couple commonalities, but they're not directly there where it's, sometimes it can be awkward for somebody to have a hero, like, maybe they work under right away. But
Yeah,
that's something I've noticed.
yeah, for sure.
All right, what you got for a hardship that you've maybe had to battle through, help you get to where you're going?
Man, I mean, there's so many. There's only been a short time in my career where I feel like everything was going right. And that was probably, coming up as a private, I didn't have much responsibility. But I wrote down my ankle surgery. This was a big one for me. Because, coming up in the army, I was always like the top guy, right? Had the highest PT score, stuff like that everywhere I went. And it wasn't till I got the ranger school bug and stuff like that I really wanted to set the bar high. And I didn't really have too much experience with like overtraining, eating right, sleeping right, proper nutrition and stuff like that. So I ended up overtraining, way more than I should have. I was 18, 19 years old, dealing with plantar fasciitis, stuff like that. So that put me out about 4 months, right? Just I couldn't even run. It was just an annoying pain. I'm sure you've dealt with that before. Plantar fasciitis. It's like that nagging injury that just seems to not go away. And I was walking down the stairs one time to go to work, and I just felt like a pop. Told my physical therapist about it. I was doing rehab and all that stuff, and it was just so hard for me to get an MRI. Just months after months. So it was total like 4 months that I was dealing with this, and I finally got that MRI. I'm an E3. As soon as I got the MRI, they called me in the next day like, hey, you obliterated all your ligaments in your ankle. You need immediate surgery. So, and this was stuff I was trying to communicate with the medical team, like, hey, something's not feeling right. I still can't run. Um, so once I found that out, it was kind of like, okay, now what? Had to get immediate surgery. This was May of 2019. So, and then, being that top guy in PT and just being that leader trying to like come up, it just showed everybody like, okay, now he's out of the fight. Now he's, rehab and doing this and that. So it was a lot of people, that's when they took their shots, right? Ranger school, sapper school, kiss that goodbye. That's never gonna happen, stuff like that. So it was a really tough time for me. Because I thought it was over, right? The medical team after that was like, "Hey, look, we've seen this injury a lot in the army, and a lot of people don't come back from it." So it was kind of like I had to self-reflect and be like, "Okay, do I let this stop me from what I want to do? Do I, take the easy way out? Do I let them med board me?" Uh, so it was a tough time. Um, but I told the doctor, I was like, "Hey, look, I'm 18, 19 years old. I've only been in the army 2 years at this point. But there's a lot I want to do." So I was like, let me do this rehab. Let me show that I can come back, and stuff like that, right? So 8 to 9 months later, they didn't med board me. He gave me a chance. Like, hey, look, just give me a chance, and he did that. And then 8 to 9 months later, I pre-ranger came to Fort Polk, Louisiana, where I was first at. And I had to talk with my leadership, like, hey, I know I've been out 8 9 months. I've been rehabbing. I haven't contributed much to the force, but this I feel like this is my chance to silence all the haters, the doubters, and really put my foot out there and see if I can do this. And luckily, I appeared top of the class in pre-ranger with it was me and one of my he was a medical MOS. He was like a foot doctor, a real like outlier MOS. Like myself, I'm a carpenter. But we appeared top of the class and we got ranger slots. And the rest is history after that, man. Went straight through ranger school. 4 or 5 months later, went straight through sapper school. So that was huge for me, just, being that 18, 19-year-old kid thinking that I'm going to do all this and then it get taken away from me. And then everyone's, oh, you're never going to do that. And then actually achieving that. I learned so much about myself within those 1 to 2 years that all that happened. And it is like the foundation of like me being a leader and how I came into like my leadership skills and stuff like that.
Oh man. I'm gonna throw down some notes from that I took. The first one was you hit it huge. Your first few years in the military, you're focused on your job, right? Oh no, you said what part of my career hasn't been a challenge? And I was like,
Yeah,
dude,
yeah,
that is amazing. Like that right there. I was like, bro, that's boom, easy. If that's what a career, I think, and it sucks to say it, but if that's what career should be like, sometimes if you are working hard and you are doing new and challenging things, it's going to be hard. Um, an easy career, I don't think is a successful career. Um, but once you said that, I was like, bro, that is one of the best answers I've heard to like your hardship. You're like, what's not a hardship?
yeah. It's
Um,
crazy.
yeah, so I took that. I took obviously being at an age where your leadership traits are probably built off of your physical characteristics, right? You're young, where you may not have all of those other traits, so you rely on the ones that people will notice right away. Physically, fitness, and so for those that following, right? If you're not in the military we have standards we have to uphold for PT or physical fitness throughout the year. And so as young airmen, soldiers, whatever, if you are excelling in PT, you can sort of take those advantages early in your career to like outshine people. And so, like you said, when you're hurt, it's a skull crusher, right? You're just like, what do
Yeah,
I have
that's
right now?
I felt like at that time that was really all I had to give, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I didn't have too much experience in my job. But
Mm-hmm.
like that's where I shined and that's where everyone realized like, okay, this guy, has a lot of potential. And you hear it a lot in the army, if you're a fast runner, you're a great leader, right? Which obviously is like it's a false narrative, but yeah. So once that was taken away from me, I had to excel in the other parts. I had to figure out, how to be better at admin, had to like still contribute without contributing physically, you know what I mean? So that in itself helped me grow as a leader of way more than just, killing everybody in PT every day.
Yeah, no,
So,
that's huge. I also took, and then for a lot of those that are in the military that are listening, we know the medical process is a pain in the butt. No offense to my medical peeps out there, man, but it is hard for us to get taken care of. I actually tried to get an MRI done on my calf after this past deployment because I heard like some sort of pop, and they're like, "We just can't give you an MRI if there's no need for surgery." And I'm like, "Well, how do you know if there's no need for surgery if you're not going to give me an MRI?" I'm like, "Bro, come on."
yeah, uh it was tough cuz it was constant like every week I'm like, "Hey, I'm getting shooting pains up my calf, up my shin. Like there's a problem here." So,
Yeah.
and it wasn't until, 4 months later like, "Yeah, you need immediate surgery."
Yeah.
So,
Now, this is going to, I think, lead us directly into some career Army progression stuff that I'm still learning about. So you mentioned a Ranger school, a Sapper school, outside of your normal job, pipeline training on the Air Force. That's weird because we don't have those opportunities in our training to like do our job and then go excel at these other programs, right? To develop us as a leader or physically fit person. It's very
mhm.
much like you in the Air Force. Like if you're I'll just say an aircrew flight equipment person on the B-1 flight equipment, that's sort of what you do throughout your career. It's hard to take these other options. So let's dive into that for a little bit on how the Army works, like these opportunities for you to excel in other areas outside of your job.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sure a lot of your viewers have heard of Ranger School, right?
Yep. Yeah.
It's an all military school. Like it doesn't matter your branch, Marines, Air
Sure.
Force. I graduated with an Air Force. I want to say it was TAC P, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it's open to everybody. Now whether you get in or whatever like that, that's a whole different story. But yeah, it's a combat leadership school, right? The basics, infantry tactics. but it's so diverse, being that like everyone can go, all MOSs can go, that like when you're there with your squad, with your platoon, with these people that you don't know and you're doing all this stuff with, and like by the time you graduate, like you have so much experience from all these MOSs,
Yeah.
all these different perspectives. And that's what makes the school so great. Like everyone, oh, you're Ranger tab, you think you're better than us, this and that. It's like what we went through in that school, like has put us in a position to like know that we can perform under pressure. We can perform whatever MOS you give us. We know we can, get them on the same page as well. So there's so many things that, me going through as a carpenter, at 20 years old, not much experience, not much belief in myself, not much confidence, but the stuff I went through, I can go anywhere and brief somebody, or, brief a squad, brief a platoon, and be like, hey, this is the mission. This is what we got to do. Now let's go execute. So there's
That's
so many like little
cool.
nuggets that it gives you.
Yeah. That is very, I think it's so insightful and so motivating to hear, because I think a lot of us, what we've heard about Ranger School, right, is like it's just physical, like, and it is physically tough, it's stressful. But what I love what you said, which a lot of people don't realize, is making decisions in a stressful situation is such a leadership trait that is lost in a lot of jobs that don't require it, right? And I think that's what I love. Like, you're going there with a bunch of MOSs where, let's say, I'll use Air Force terms, it's a DFAC chow hall cook, right? Like, where they may not need to learn to make decisions in stressful situations at that job, but when they have an opportunity to go to Ranger School and do it there, they bring it back to their workplace, and it just amplifies their leadership skills, because they're not taught it there. They're taught it somewhere else where it's just those opportunities. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, being an engineer, a vertical engineer, non-combat MOS, you hear it all the time, like, oh, we don't need to know that stuff, we're engineers, this and that. But at the end of the day, like, it's 10 level tasks, right? It's basic level tasks that every soldier, regardless of job, should know. So just, and then like bringing that back to the unit, like you said, like that's the whole point of those schools, being a force multiplier for the unit. Because now the Army invested all this money into me. I need to go back and train more and more. So that way, it brings the level of the unit up. Not just go there and, wear a tab and think, I'm the best, this and that, which it happens a lot. You see it a lot.
Yeah.
Somebody will go graduate and they just keep all the knowledge to themselves, and it's not helping anybody else.
Yeah.
So, you get both sides of the spectrum for real, but it's tough.
Yeah. And that's one of my, I, I wanted to, I don't really want to develop, but I want to make like a leadership pet peeves trait list, but I don't, because pet peeves are so personal. But the secret game in the military is always very annoying to me when I talk to somebody about something and like, oh, I already knew that. And I'm like, bro, how did you already know that? And you didn't tell me. Like, come
Yeah.
on, man. And like, you can't be, that's why I'm doing this. I'm literally doing this so people can hear everything I'm doing. So if I have to brief an airman or give feedback to an airman and they didn't know what to do, I can be like, that's not true, because I literally told you everything I do to help be successful. But yeah. All right. What is SAPPER?
So Sapper, it's I get this question all the time, right? So Sapper is like the history dates back all since the beginning of the Army. Combat engineers, right? So pretty much anything, breaching, demolition, stuff like that, clearing the way, is pretty much what a sapper does. So as an engineer, we're all sappers, right?
Okay.
But sapper school was it began for the combat engineers, the 12 Bravos, the combat engineers, who need to know how to work demolitions and do all that stuff. Now, not everybody as an engineer like has to go to sapper school, needs to go to sapper school or whatever, but it's open to all engineers. Primarily for the 12 Bravos, the 12 Alphas, the officers, the engineer officers, but it's open for all of us, right? And it's open to other MOSs, infantry, stuff like that. It's open to Marines. I don't know if I've ever seen any Air Force go through, but it's an all Army school or military school as well. It's a combat leadership school, so it's still you're still learning all the same stuff that you would in Ranger school, like in patrolling phase, but it's just focused primarily on the engineering side of things. But that's another school where it's like you're going to learn a lot about yourself. You're going to get all these
Yeah.
different perspectives, and and they did a program to where some privates that are killing it in basic training can just go right to cyber school
Oh,
right away. So now you have these E2, E3s going to the force with a sapper tab, and the reason behind it was, those E5, E6, E7s who didn't want to go, right, are seeing these privates with sapper tabs and like, okay, now it forces them to self-reflect and be like, okay, why don't I have that? I should probably, lead from the front, like, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of things that were behind that, but yeah, it's like a little brother to Ranger School. You know what I mean? They want to be like Ranger School, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just it's a school where you go. You have to be a little more educated. You have to know a little bit more, because it's a sprint. It's only 28 days instead of 62. But I learned more in Sapper School, in 28 days than I did in Ranger School. Um, I was still 20 years old. I just graduated Ranger School a couple months prior. So I was still pretty green in my career, you know what I mean? Not experienced too much, but because of that confidence that I got from Ranger School, I went into Sapper School like, okay, what's the mission? What do we got to do? What do we need to learn? Let's go. And being the only tab person in my squad, that was huge for me. Just once I got to patrolling to like, hey, this is what we do. This is how we get our mission complete. And just helping everyone that I could get their tab was like my only goal. So
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, perfect. Sweet. All right. You ready to dive into this, the big topics here?
let's get it.
All right. So just like you guys have all heard before, we hit the 3 H's. We talked to some background history, career stuff. Now we're going to dive into the leadership portion of this podcast. I'm going to ask him a question. We're going to go over my leadership philosophy. Then we're going to hit some traits. All right. So the question I have for you is, what do you look for in a new leader / like young LT sort of right out the gates? What do you want to see?
Okay, so from like an NCO perspective or like an officer perspective? Like if
Let's
I'm
just see
getting that
somebody
that
new coming
new
in, like somebody new coming into your team that's about to take charge. Like,
okay. So I'll answer this in two ways. I'll answer it as like me being a prior squad leader before recruiting. So I get that new NCO, right? That new E5, that young E5, or like a specialist just promoted. Me personally, what I'm looking for is someone who's coachable. Because you see it too many times, someone's in that leadership position, they think they know it all, this and that. It's from all the way top to bottom. But I'm just looking for someone that's coachable, who does the basics, like doesn't forget the basics, being on time, right uniform, right attitude, that stuff is always paramount to me. But I think being coachable and just having that inner drive, like not doesn't just want to show up every day, but wants to like add something to the force, add something to the team. Um, yeah, that's the biggest thing. And if you show up ready to go, and you have that like drive that you want to learn, you want to do better, I love that because that's how I came up, that's how I am to this day. So that really, and we just add fuel to the fire, right? So I'm adding fuel to their fire, they're adding fuel to mine, and we just grow together as a team. I feel like that's the most conducive leadership environment.
perfect. No, I love it. Coachable is huge. It's a hard trait to come by for young new leaders because they want to show their initiative, right? They want to show they're in charge, so they may not want to be coached.
Yeah.
So to be a leader, you have to be coachable. That's huge. Know the basics is always a huge one, right? Because if there are some areas you can excel on that are simple, it's easy to win. Get those easy, solid wins right away. Show up on time. Know when formation is. Know all the stuff where you're not like, you're not making people second guess why you're there. And then the inner drive is always good because sometimes coming into those leadership positions, it's like the all force no vector saying, right? Like you may come in a hard charge, but you just don't know why you're doing it or what you're supposed to be doing. So having a drive to put you in the right direction is key. So those are great 3 areas: coachable, know the basics, and have the inner drive. Nice. All right, let's get into this. My first leadership trait, and these are in order, so you sort of have to do the top and then work down to the bottom to be successful. Leading by example in all we do, followed by to be selfless. You have to be selfish. Build relationships based on trust and care, and then challenge the road in front of you by getting comfortable being uncomfortable. So out of those ones, is there any particular ones that stand out? What do you got?
I mean, there's a couple that stick out. So you said lead by example, right? So I take that as kind of like lead from the front. That's something that I've always kept like in my head, just coming up as a private as well. That's huge to me because as leaders, like we can't ask our subordinates or whatever to do something that we wouldn't do. All
That's
right,
it right there.
because you've
Yes.
been, I'm sure you've been in this situation like I have, like, oh, he's asking me to do this because he doesn't want to do it or he probably can't do it. I'm gonna do it anyway because it's a lawful order, whatever. But you take those things and you notice those things, and soldiers will notice those things of like, oh, he's just being lazy, he doesn't want to do it, so he's making me do it, and you kind of lose respect over time that way. So I always made it a point in my career to be like, okay, hey, this is what we got to do. I'm gonna do it with y'all, this and that, or like, hey, like you need to work on this and that, because like, coming up, I was still killing PT in this, but I'd have that overweight senior NCO like, oh, you should have ran harder, you should have done more push-ups, and you could tell like they're not even passing, tape or their PT test, so stuff like that. I always keep that in my head. And what was that last one you said?
The last one, number 4, is challenge the road in front of you, getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, so that's a huge one for me as well. Just because it's so easy to get complacent especially in today's army. You see it every day. And being in my job field, as an engineer, that's the mantra. Oh, we're just engineers. So you get a lot of people who just show up, do their, whatever we got to do, and then just go home. So me just getting uncomfortable, like, okay, if it's cold, hey, let's train, like let's add some value to this or stuff like that. And I always used to preach that to my guys, like whatever situation, treat it like it's real. All right, like we're doing some engineering mission in Romania, and as NCOs we messed up a little bit, so our platoon sergeant roughed us up. But I was telling my team like, hey, this is just a bunch of stuff we have to carry, but treat it as if it's real. Treat it as if it's one of your buddies, that we have to, put on a litter and carry him, to the Kazvac or whatever. So just adding value and stuff like that, trying to get them in that mindset, like, hey, like this may be dumb now, but like there's value that we can add to this, stuff like that. So, and just being a
Yep.
carpenter doing what I've done, is very uncomfortable. I,
Yep.
I, I got asked, why are you at Ranger School? Like by the instructors, like, why are you here? You're like, you're a carpenter. Like, why are you here? I was just, hey, I want to be great just like everybody else. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, I mean, that's huge to me. Lead from the front and comfortable being uncomfortable, I'd say, are my top two.
Yeah, I like how you talked about leading from the front, for the lead by example. And there are definitely times where as a leader we can be motivating and understanding that what we're motivating we may not be able to do, but you have to be able to express that though too. So like for instance, if I'm a squadron commander or brigade commander, I'm trying to motivate people to go do their job, but that's not necessarily my job. I have to understand what I'm saying that they're taking off as not me telling them I could do better, or I don't know how to do their job, but if I were in their shoes, I could still work as hard as them. And that's why and I think you said, I think it was, you have to be able to do the task that you're telling somebody to do, right? So, that's a huge line when it comes to leading by example. It's not always being out there in the front with them, but understanding that you've done it a couple times and you can, if you need to show them.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're going to have those people who will challenge you, man. They'll be like, oh, I don't think you can do this. And that's when you have to like every now and then just jump out there, go grind with them, go move with them. And then step back and be like, cool, see you guys, like that's how it's done, like I still got it, and it may add time to our schedule, but those are the little things that are going to help them go further.
Yeah, it just furthers that trust, and that cohesion within that team or that squad or that platoon. That is needed for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It ties right into the build relationships on trust and care, right? Like if they know you can do the job you're asking them to do, they're going to work harder for you because, like heck, who doesn't want their boss to go do the job for them? Like that's pretty motivating right there to be like, oh, I can't mess this up because if he comes down and shows me how to do this, like I'm never going to regret it. So it builds that trust and almost like that spark to still work hard. So you can sort of give them that time to do what they got to do. Um, yeah, and I've heard that a few times, the getting comfortable being uncomfortable when it comes to some jobs in just the military in general, because, like to get good at a job, is getting comfortable, right? Because you're getting experience at it. It's getting easier. So then you're like, oh, this is pretty easy. I can just do this the rest of my career. But I think what'll happen in most people when they do that, they're going to start falling behind because they're probably going to see as the job is easy for them, those who are moving on are probably doing different things. They're probably doing harder tasks or different tasks, or they're going to ranger school or going to sapper school because they're finding these other areas to challenge them to bring back to the job to make it more difficult. And that's so like if let's say I'm gonna pop quiz you here. How do I motivate this younger generation to get uncomfortable? Because you see it as a recruiter, right? You're probably meeting a lot of these younger recruits, younger generation. What are some tools and tricks for people out there? It's hard.
Man, that is a very hard question. I've only been in the Army a little over 6 years now, since I was 17 years old, but it's a whole different vibe. It's a whole different feel. It's just a whole different level of soldier that we're getting nowadays. And there's nothing wrong with that. You have to adapt and overcome with whatever you get. But ah, let's see. How would I? I mean, that's tough.
It's a hard question.
I feel like the monetary value definitely is like what's motivating a lot of these younger generations. And like job security, I feel like because the world's so crazy nowadays, you don't know, nothing's guaranteed. You know what I mean? But like in the military, you have a job that you're gonna do this. Everything's planned out for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as far as like the ones who are already in that are younger, I feel like everyone's so different, like they want to be that leader that they've always wanted. Um, and that, that can go so many different ways, but I don't know. I just always put a smile on my face and I'm always positive, and if like, I don't think you can have a bad mood if you're around me, you know what I mean? I'm always like, hey, how you doing? Hey, let's go do this. I'm just so energetic. Um, but as far as like motivating, it's really what they want.
Yeah.
Like me doing everything I've done in my career, I can't, take private Snuffy or whatever and be like, hey, let's go train it for you to go to Ranger School, because that might not be what he wants to do. So it's really like that building that trust and cohesion. It's knowing your people, knowing what motivates them. Like, hey, you want education? Like, this is how you do this. Hey, you want to learn more about your craft? Like, okay, let's get into the regulation and see what we can do to help you there. So it's really just knowing your team
I
and
think I
finding those. Yeah,
It ties into the step above. Build relationships based off trust and care. People will go extra miles when they know you care for them. And you hit it like, here's what I get from a lot of leaders. I don't have the time to get to know 100 or 50 airmen or where they're all from or what motivates them or what their dog's name is. I'm like, have you even tried to get to know 3 people around you and see what just those 3 people's lives will be impacted off of just caring for them? Like, people will go so much further when you know their first name or heck where they're from. I was talking to another airman because we're reading a book right now, How to Win Friends and Influence People, I think it's called. And one of the chapters is know their first name. And he's a security forces guy. And he messaged me. He goes, hey, Manny, dude, I just read this book. And it talks about to get people to open up and, motivate them a little bit, say their first name. And obviously he scans a cat card or the CAC every morning. And he was telling me, I think I want to say, have a good day and like insert their first name, right? He's like, what do you think? And I was like, dude, I think that'd be pretty cool because as a flight commander, when I was a flight commander, I put aside rank a lot when I talk to people. It was usually last name, or if I did get to know them and build that relationship, it was a first name, And obviously, a lot of people frown upon getting to know from an officer to enlisted standpoint of first names because like fraternization and all that. But when I'm wholehearted in the process, I'm intentful about it. I have meaning behind it. They're going to work so much harder. So I told him, I was like, hey, the first name may not be like the best way for somebody, if you're just going off a CAC, hey, good morning. Last name is definitely help instead of like, because whenever I go through, it's like, hey, have a good day, sir. I'm like, okay, cool. But if they were to be like, hey, have a good day, Lamson or Captain Lamson, I'm like, oh, well, thank you. Same as the grocery clerks in a store. If you just were to look up and just look at their name, like, hey, Sally, have a good day. They'd probably be like, oh, thank you. Like,
yeah. It's the little things for sure that can go a long way, and like a lot of people wouldn't even realize it. But Yeah, that's huge. And I think like if you treat, you know, your subordinates or whoever you have, like if you treat them like a human,
Yeah.
like just doing that will go so far for you. Like
Crazy.
structure and like chain of command is great and everything like that. Like it's there for a reason. But like at the end of the day, like you put your boots on, like I put my boots on. Like we may get paid different, or we get, you know what I mean. But like we're human, you know. We have our own problems, we have our own lives, our own hardships that we have to deal with. But we got to come together and accomplish a common goal at the end of the day. So just doing that, I think like I noticed a huge difference, you know, from when I first got promoted to a leadership position, to where like now it's like okay, like how's the family doing? You know, being in Europe, you know, we're far away from our family. Like, ask my soldiers, like, hey, how's your family doing? This and that. Oh, you still have a girlfriend going to college? This place, you know, stuff like that. That went a long way for me.
Yeah, that's cool. I love it. But yeah, I think that's a great way for that question. How to challenge, how to help those get uncomfortable is one, you have to get to know them so you know what motivates them. What is their intrinsic
Mm.
motivation? It can be money. It can be their job security, which is a great way to start. That's sort of like the blanket, like, I'm getting to know you, but I know you're motivated because you signed this commitment. You got this bonus. Let's use that for now, but I need you to go a little bit further. What can we do to get to that next level? Okay, John, you want to be an astronaut when you grow up? Well, dude, have you even read this book about being an astronaut? I've read it. It's pretty good. Oh, okay. And that builds that little commonality right there. Perfect. Sweet. Let's jump into some extra leadership traits. I don't know if you have the list up or you picked a couple in the
Yeah, I
email.
picked a couple. I picked a couple for
Cool. Let's
sure.
let's dive on into it. If you got any extras, let me know. I got my book. I will write them down and add them to the list.
Yeah, I got one that you didn't have up there. But I'll start. So I already talked about lead from the front and what it means to me. But
Yep.
what I wrote down that you had was like always learning. I know we hit on it a little bit earlier. Um, that's just being that, you know, being in that growth mindset, you know, showing up like knowing
Yeah.
that you don't know everything. I've had multiple situations that, you know, I didn't know how to handle the situation, or I didn't know, you know, maybe I didn't know the answer that that soldier wanted. But it's, you know, taking that time to learn it, to figure out how do I get there, how do I get them there. Just always being coachable, I think it comes down to, and knowing that you don't always have the answer, which is okay. Like no one
Mhm.
expects everyone to know everything. That would just take you so far in itself. So that one's a big one that I wrote down. And then transparency is huge for me. Being that, you know, I was a leader since I was 19 years old, you know what I mean? So I was in charge of people way older than me and stuff like that. But I think if you're transparent and like you're not trying to be like, hey, I'm a leader, you're older than me, but that doesn't matter. But just knowing that like, hey, like this is the goal, we all got to get there. This is the mission. This is whatever. And that way, everyone they don't look at it like, okay, he's just trying to show that he's over us or whatever like that. And that you know, just being transparent in anything, just keeping that like open communication is huge, you know, in a team. So that's what I wrote down.
Cool. Yeah, let's dive into the always be learning because this is the second podcast I've done and it's the second time it's came up. And I tell people I said this in my so this one's gonna publish after the one with Columbo, but I wanna put an asterisk after my 4 leadership traits and then put always be learning. Because it's always one that I want to like throw in there right away because it's one that usually always gets brought up with an extra leadership trait and it's just right there. The reason I don't have it in my leadership philosophy is because leading by example in all we do is always be learning. Like that should like tie into that. But whenever I hear multiple people say like, "Oh, I love this other one," I'm like, "That's good, perfect," because it's like a commonality on what all leaders are seeing. Um, and what's cool
Yeah,
about always be learning is I'm not asking somebody to learn about something really hard, right? Like I don't expect somebody to learn a whole new language or a whole new degree or a whole new job. It could just be something little. Like I just want them to be pushing themselves a little bit further. Fitness and health and wellness is an easy example to always be learning in. You should be educating yourself on what's good for your body, what exercises help with what do you guys ACFT or AFCT?
yeah, ACFT.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's like an area you can always be learning because it's going to impact your career. But if you're learning about crocheting or doing a podcast, like that's cool, like it builds a relationship with me. I get to know something new about you. But yeah, always be learning is like that asterisk to my 4 traits that.
Yeah, like an implied task, if you will.
Yep. Yeah. Transparency is always a good one, but transparency is hard because people are going to say, if you're transparent, you're just like an open butterfly, right? Like you're just that person that tells everybody your problems. And so it's a tough one to balance when I talk about transparency with people because this generation is very why, right? Like, why do I do this? Why do I have to do that? Which can come off as them trying to be transparent, like they want to know what they're doing. So there's like a fine line with transparency. You have to have trust with that person because I can't just go to my commander and be super open with them, right, on everything
Yeah.
because that's just the rank. Like this is the way it is. Like I can't. But if you build a relationship with them, like we just talked about before, the transparency I have with my commander, the relationship I built with them with where I'm at in my career, trying to cross train things going on. I know I can be transparent in some things I wouldn't say with other people because we've built that trust, and I know he's going to give me the direct feedback I need, put me in the right direction. But there's definitely times where you just have to go shut up and color, right? Like if you're told to go do something, you can't be transparent and ask why 1,000 times. Just go do it first. That's all I want to see you do. I want to see you just go execute this task. If it sucks, it sucks. But I want to see what you got. And then you come back to me and give me feedback on what you would have done different.
Yeah, and I take that as like just comparing like when I first, when I was at E1 in the Army compared to like the E1 to E4s now, it's like I couldn't ask those questions when I was coming up.
Yeah.
And it was only 6-7 years ago. I couldn't ask why. I had a very like short, stocky platoon sergeant who was very hard charging. Like whatever he says went. So I didn't get that luxury that maybe now today is like, oh, hey sergeant, why are we doing this? Oh, that's dumb. Why are we doing this? Stuff like that that I see all the time. But yeah,
Yeah.
it is a tough line that you have to like navigate, but for sure it's really important.
No. What else?
So one that you didn't have that I forgot where I got this from, but if you're going to the top, take someone with you. I think that's a good one. Especially for me,
Like training replacement, like sort of one. You should be, like training somebody to replace you.
yeah, for sure. It's kind of like I'm trying to think of who told me this, but it was young coming up in my career, right? Because it was pretty obvious to see what trajectory I was on when I was coming up, and I just remember someone telling me, maybe it was my old sergeant major, um, like, look, it's cool and all, you're killing it, you're doing this and this and that, but who are you bringing with you? And that really stuck with me because I wasn't training somebody, at that time. I was focused on like, all right, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And once I got that little nugget, I was like, okay, that's it kind of just changed my mindset a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah, yeah.
to where I'd find that soldier, that up and comer, like, hey, like they want more. Let me take them to the gym with me. Let me give them some tips here, like stuff like that. And yeah, I've always taken that with me.
I was writing it down. I like that because it's showing like that care, like you're taking the time to bring up that next person behind you. I like that. Take someone to the top. That's number 31 for me now. So take someone with you to the top. Man, that definitely changes the game. I'm not gonna lie. I'm just thinking about it. Like, what's cool about it is that you can do it in different aspects of your life, right? So if you're like good at PT, you're taking somebody with you to get better. If you're good at your job, you take somebody different with you to get better. Or if you're just good at different things, you're trying to find somebody who's not really good, but that could use it, that you've seen that could have helped you in your career.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
like that. I like that. Cool. All right. Do you have a book that you would like to recommend to people?
So this is like, I really need to get into reading a lot more. But the last book, so I read all of David Goggins' books, right?
Yep.
Can't Hurt Me and Never Finished.
Mm-hmm.
I would say Can't Hurt Me. I read that book twice just because I thought maybe I might have missed something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, just how I came up, and then how David Goggins came up. Like there was a lot of things that resonated with me. Um, and it just kind of like just callous the mind, you know what I mean? Like change my mindset a little bit of how I can like look at different situations that have happened in my career, in my life. So I feel like that's a great book, especially if you kind of don't know where you're at, what your leadership style is, like what you want to do in life. I feel like that book really like might open your eyes and be like, okay, like I think life is bad or I think this is bad, but if I look at it this way, this is only helping me for this, or this I'm only doing this because this is gonna, get me right for this and stuff like that. So that was a really good book. Yeah, but I definitely need to read more for sure.
Yeah, so those of you guys that don't know, David Goggins was a military guy. Like, if you're new to the podcast and you haven't been listening to a lot of podcasts, or you don't know a lot of motivational Instagram reels out there, then you're probably in a bubble. If you're David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me book is, and I like that you said it's not just for people like in the military, which some people may think, right? They're like, oh, I'm not in the military. Why? But his book is for those that just want you to know how much more they are capable of doing. I tell people it is the worst book you can read because it makes your life look freaking pathetic.
Like, yeah, very
Like, I
minuscule,
read
like
that book
whatever.
and
Yeah,
I thought I was working hard.
yeah. Or I thought I went through a lot, and then you just listen to how he came up. Yeah, it's
But
all
it
about
does. It puts
perspective.
in perspective how much more we can give. Um, and that's what it opened up for me when I was doing my journey from 75 hard, which is why I read that book, because it showed me. I was like, dude, there's a lot more I can do with my life right now. Like, I should not be complaining about trying to lose weight or struggling in my job, or like these little things that we take for granted. Um, but yeah, so good book. I'll put it in the show notes. Most people probably have heard of it, but it's definitely a book you should. I haven't read it twice. I feel like if I read it twice, I'm going to run through a wall again.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to be so amped. Like every section, I'm going to be like, oh my God, I remember just reading this last time. Like, this part is so dope.
Yeah, well, I did the audiobooks, right? So,
I,
David Goggins
I
being
heard it was
someone,
good.
yeah, so he's always someone that's like never wants to be like somebody else, or he just wants to, trailblaze his own path. So it's a book, but it's also a podcast. Like he'll recap every chapter and stuff like that, like himself. So like you're reading what the book is, but you're also hearing on like how he felt in that moment, what he was thinking, stuff like that. So just hearing like his perspective and like everything that he recaps on it, and like it just opens up a lot more. So that's why I read it again, just to be like, okay, maybe I wasn't really paying attention to what he was saying. Let me stuff like that.
Nice. Yeah, it's a good book. All right, the one I am recommending is Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. Um, there are a couple reasons. One, it's a super short read, nothing too crazy. Um, and it also, so I like it because being a military person, that's probably what a lot of people think we read is all these like military books. So like Matthew McConaughey, right? Popular actor, a lot of people who know, sort of, did a lot of rom coms, transitioned to like Interstellar and some other more serious roles. But it's cool to hear their life. Like that's why I like it. It's just like you don't know what you don't know. So we can't judge people based
Hmm.
off of like, especially actors, right? Where we think their life is super easy. They're making millions of dollars. Like, oh, this guy has it. But he definitely has his struggles. He has a word that a lot of people understand that he says a lot, which is living, right? He says LIVIN. He hits that really hard. He talks about how he balances his work, his family, his friends. He's got a great podcast with Ed Milet where they dive deep into how they structure like their habits, their routine, their like motivation. And so it's just a really cool. It's a nice. It's not like David Goggins where you're gonna want to run through a wall. It's like a book where you read and you're like, man, that was good. Like there's definitely a couple things I could change in my life. And I've added a couple. I'm about to read it here in the next few months after I read another book again. But I'm in like a year where I'm rereading a lot of the books I read last year because I was just like in this power phase, was reading a bunch of books. So now I'm like, because I have to read books twice or three times. The first time I read a book, I sort of just read it to read it. I'm not really taking notes. It's
Yeah,
more just for
yeah.
getting notes. So now I'm going back through books multiple times, like How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm reading that one again. Green Lights, I'll read again.
Yeah, it sounds like a
And
really
I'll
good book.
actually take notes on them and start like tabbing the books and stuff like that. But Green Lights, Matthew McConaughey, super easy book. Um, And it's just fun. I think it was just a fun book to read. But yeah.
That sounds good. I also have Extreme Ownership by Jocko.
Yeah. Another good one.
I haven't read it all the way through. I've like bits and pieces. I can't like. It's so hard to read paperback. Like you know what I mean.
I'm all
And
paperback all the way.
yeah, it's hard for me. Like my mind's always going, or I'm always
Oh yeah.
doing something. You know what I mean? So that's why I like audiobooks. You know, when I'm driving or whatever, stuff like that. But that's another one I want to finish for sure.
Nice. Well, cool, man. I'm pumped. I'm excited. Do you have any last final thoughts or anything crazy you want to leave the people with on what they can do to help, get that next step?
Just believe in yourself. You know, keep the main thing the main thing. Just have a purpose in whatever you're doing. I feel like it's huge because a lot of people just go through the motions. Just kind of like think of something that that's why you're doing it. I know that's big for me. But no, I don't really have too much else. I got a lot of stuff coming up, a lot of stuff in the works right now, career wise, life wise. But we're just grinding. We're just trying to get better every day.
Well, that's perfect, man. I will leave your info on the bottom. So is your Instagram going to be easiest one for people to reach you? Or is there anywhere else you want me to throw in there? Or?
SSG Sapper, SSG Sapper, USAREC, pretty easy. You guys can
Cool.
see kind of like what I've done in my career, what I do day to day, interacting with the youth, and just trying to get everyone to whatever it is they want to get to.
Nice. Yeah, I love it, man. For those listening, I appreciate you guys staying on board, listening to us just dive deep into some leadership traits. And like I said, if there's anything you guys took from it, feel free to share, save, do what you got to do to show some love. I'm loving this process. A good friend told me when you're doing podcasting, the first 50 episodes are for you. The next 50 are for them. So I'm in the process right now of doing it for me to help you guys, and then we'll change it up and add a lot more value, which